The silence of deep space wasn't silent at all. Not if you were sitting in the command chamber of the Valgarith, the Third Fleet's pride, heart, and iron fist of the Empire. Alarms buzzed under the floor, lights flickered just enough to annoy, and the crew, dozens of them, scaled, horned, some even half bionic, scrambled over their consoles like rats under threat of fire. "Commander, it's holding position, just outside our sensor range." General Kyle Thuron stared at the center holodisplay, arms crossed, jaw tight. He was a war-born Dronari, bred from 7 bloodlines of conquerors. He had slaughtered 1,000 worlds, seen entire species kneel. But right now, his eyes didn't blink. Because that thing out there, it didn't blink either. I said, "Identify it." His voice was low, calm, the kind of calm that came before a beast tore flesh. The junior tactician's hands trembled over the console. "We can't, General. There's no match in any galactic registry, no drive signature, no faction mark. It's running cold, no heat, no emissions, no comms." "Yet it's powered?" Kale growled. "Yes, sir, and it's locked weapons on us." The room fell into a low murmur of disbelief. Locked on them? The Valgarith wasn't a simple cruiser. It was a city-sized executioner, 10 kilometers long, cloaked, armored in tritium, an empire killer, and now something was targeting it. Coyle moved toward the display. The unknown ship was just a black dot in the void. No silhouette, no detail. Just dark, like it had absorbed the light around it. "Any signal from the Empire's command net?" "None. Long-range relays are down." The comms officer didn't dare make eye contact. "Sir, we're isolated." Kyle's throat tensed. They were in the Dervian expanse, 3 jumps outside known borders. It was supposed to be a test flight, a systems check. No threats, no anomalies, no surprises. But then the thing appeared. It didn't jump in. It didn't warp. It didn't even show up on scanners. It was just there, like the void coughed it out. "Send a standard Imperial hail," Kyle ordered. "I want to know what kind of fool thinks they can lock on to me." The bridge went quiet as the automated message was broadcast. It played once, twice, 3 times. No reply. Kale clenched his teeth. Then the display changed. A static burst. Then a voice. "Your fleet is now under observation. Any offensive action will result in termination." The voice wasn't alien. It wasn't synthetic. It wasn't even distorted. It was human. Old Earth human. Low, quiet, almost bored. But it had weight. Too much weight. Like the words weren't being spoken. They were being delivered. Kyle stepped back. "Did he say, human?" one of the crew whispered. Kale turned sharply. Number he didn't. Because humans are extinct. They were erased 3,000 cycles ago. The room remained still. No one argued. No one reminded him that humans had died screaming on fire-soaked worlds, broken under Dronari boots and orbital cannons, because they all heard it too. The voice, the warning. And now the ship was moving. It didn't accelerate. It didn't ignite thrusters. It just moved, as if the void itself obeyed. "Raise shields," Kyle ordered. "Arm all cannons. I don't care if it's a ghost from Earth's ashes or a rebel AI in a tin can. If it fires, we turn it to dust." Weapons systems came online. Power grids surged, and then the unknown ship disappeared. No flash. No warp. Just gone. "Did we scare it off?" someone said, half laughing, half terrified. "No." Kyle's voice dropped like iron. "We didn't scare it. It's inside." All eyes turned toward the rear bulkhead as the lights flickered again, and from the hallway, through sealed hatches that shouldn't open, came footsteps. Human ones. Slow. Measured. Confident. Kyle drew his sidearm. "Battle stations. Find him, kill him, and get me answers." The chaos had just begun. Kyle's boots thundered down the corridor, his personal guards flanking him in tight formation. The Valgorith's interior was a fortress, reinforced plasteel bulkheads, kinetic dampeners, biometric lockouts. No one got through unless Kyle let them. That was the rule. That had always been the rule. Now someone had broken it. They moved fast, but not reckless. Whatever was on board, it wanted to be seen. The motion sensors on Deck 3 had triggered. But when the surveillance cameras flicked to life, static, not failure, blocked. It was as if someone reached inside the system and yanked out the eyes. "Any sign of breach?" Kale barked to his second, a jagged-scaled veteran named Gorak. "None, General. No hull damage, no depressurization. Internal sensors say the ship's sealed." Kale grunted. "Then explain the footsteps." Gorak hesitated. That hesitation was dangerous. Kale's own claws twitched. "Explain. We can't, sir. There's no biometric trace, no thermal reading, but something's walking." Kyle didn't need explanations. He needed contact. They reached Deck 3. A squad was already waiting. Armor-plated, rifles drawn, eyes wide. Too wide. Soldiers ready for war didn't shake like that. "Where?" Kyle snapped. The squad leader pointed down the left hall. "Storage corridor. It's been locked since last cycle, but the hatch was open when we arrived. Someone's inside." Kyle raised his weapon. "With me." They advanced. The corridor was long, unlit except for the red emergency strips along the floor. Every step echoed. The air felt thicker here. Wrong somehow. He couldn't smell anything. Not metal, not oil, not even the ozone from the shields. Just cold. Then came the sound again. Footsteps, clear, steady. Right ahead. The guards froze. Kyle didn't. He stepped forward into the dark. The figure emerged from shadow like a ghost wearing skin. Humanoid. Pale skin. Tall, lean, but built like he knew violence. No armor, just a torn flight suit and a gauntlet on one arm that shimmered in and out of reality. And the eyes. Gods. The eyes weren't eyes at all. They were human, yes. But behind them was something else. Something Kale couldn't categorize. Not fear, not rage, not even hatred. It was memory. This man remembered things that had died before your species crawled from lava. Kyle raised his weapon. "Identify yourself." The human stopped. "I already did." Kale narrowed his eyes. "You are trespassing aboard an Imperial vessel. This is an act of war." The human tilted his head slightly. Not amused. Not threatened. "You declared war on us 3,000 years ago. We ended that war." "No." The man's voice dropped. "You just stopped hearing us scream." The squad behind Kyle flinched. He didn't. "I don't know what you are, but you're not human. They're extinct." The human's mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not quite. "Is that what your history taught you?" Kyle growled. "I was there." "I know." The voice was calm now. Not just calm, in control. "You were on Terra Prime. You ordered the orbital burn. You watched it turn to ash." Kale's pulse slowed. He remembered that mission. He remembered the fire. The way the earth cracked like glass. "How do you know that?" The man lifted his gauntlet. A projection flickered to life between them. It wasn't an image. It was him. Kyle. Younger. Smiling. Standing in front of a firing squad, watching humans get executed. He lunged forward, weapon raised. "How did you get that?" But the human was already gone. No motion. No retreat. Just gone. A second later, the overhead lights exploded. Not shattered. Imploded. The darkness swallowed everything. The squad opened fire, blaster bolts lighting up the corridor like lightning. But the only thing they hit was walls. Kyle dropped to one knee, scanning, breathing slow. He'd fought rebels, insurgents, rogue AIs, even void-born predators. But this wasn't a weapon. This was a reckoning. Then the intercom crackled. "You will listen, because I will make sure you remember every face you burned." Every screen across the ship blinked. Crew stopped what they were doing as their consoles displayed ancient images, photos, recordings, old Earth families, children, soldiers, farmers, faces staring out with unspoken grief. Then the ship's artificial gravity pulsed. Systems began to fail, not catastrophically, surgically. Lights on Deck 7, weapons in Sector 4. Navigation drifted 0.3 degrees off course, then corrected, then dropped again. The ship was being tested. Not destroyed. Hacked. Gorak's voice exploded in Kale's earpiece. "Sir, central systems are failing. Engineering reports power fluctuations. They can't isolate the source." Kale stood slowly. He wasn't afraid. Fear was for the weak. But rage was useful. He had to crush this thing now before panic spread. "Lock down all sectors. Initiate purge protocol if necessary. I want every corridor swept. Seal the bridge." "Aye, General, but—" Gorak's voice cut out. The line was dead. Kyle cursed and turned to his guards. Back to command, now. But when they rounded the corridor back toward the lift shaft, it was sealed. Not locked. Gone. As if the hallway had never existed. "What in the black void?" one guard whispered. The air grew colder again. Not physical cold. A feeling. A weight pressing down on their backs, their lungs, their thoughts. Kyle spun. Behind him, the human stood there again. This time he spoke clearly. "You erased us from the archives. You turned our graves into factories. You told your empire we were primitive." He took a step forward. "We learned from you." Another step. "We built weapons that think in pain, ships that bleed into time, and we waited." Kyle aimed and fired. The bolt passed through him. No sound, no scream. The image flickered. A projection? A decoy? Or something else entirely? Kyle turned back to his men. "Fall back. Find another route to command." But the floor began to shift. Just slightly. 1 inch lower, then another. Like the whole deck was breathing. That was impossible. The ship had no moving parts like this. The Valgorith wasn't alive. Was it? Kyle pushed the thought aside and moved. They backtracked 3 corridors until they found a service shaft still intact. He pried it open with his own claws and descended fast. Every second mattered. Somewhere, he felt the human watching. Not through cameras, through the ship itself. Like he had fused with it. No, like the ship was his body. They reached the auxiliary passage leading to command. A security team was already there, weapons raised. "Sir, we've lost 60% of our sensor network. Internal defenses are disabled. He's in the walls." Kyle pushed through. Inside the command bridge, the atmosphere was different, like the air had memory. No one spoke. Everyone stared at the holomap. The unknown ship, the one that had started this, was back on the display. Still there, still targeting them. But now 10 more signals had appeared behind it. No engine trails, no heat, no origin point. Just black ships, unmarked, silent, waiting. Kyle stared at them. "How many?" 11, now 12, 13. The count rose. The crew didn't even pretend to be calm now. Kyle leaned over the console. "Bring up the signal log. Show me the origin of that voice." The tech obeyed. Only one entry existed, a short, encoded string. But the metadata, it was tagged. Origin. Earth. Kale's breath caught. That wasn't possible. Earth was gone, burned, cracked, melted. Nothing could have lived. Yet here it was. A signal. From the grave. The voice came again, this time only in Kale's earpiece. "We're not here for peace, and we're not here for justice. We're here to remind you." Kyle closed his eyes for a moment, just a moment, as the realization began to settle in like ash on skin. This wasn't a terrorist. It wasn't a rebel. It wasn't vengeance. It was the beginning, and they were already too late to stop it. The bridge pulsed with quiet dread. Not a single word had been spoken in the last full minute. Kyle could hear the hum of the ship's core beneath the deck, the artificial heart of the Valgarith still beating like it hadn't been compromised. But he knew better. It was no longer their heart. That voice in his ear had confirmed what Kyle wouldn't say out loud. They weren't alone on this ship. And this wasn't a skirmish. This was war. And it was already happening inside them. "General," came a whisper from across the command console. It was Varric, the helm officer. Younger, sharper than most. Loyal, but even his eyes looked sunken now. "The unknown ships. They're forming a line, blocking our escape route through the alien rift." Kale moved closer to the display. The black ships were in motion. Silent, geometrically perfect, lining up like executioners around a noose. "How far?" Kale asked. 3 minutes, maybe less. If we engage our slipstream now." "No," Kyle snapped. "That's what they want. We jump, we blind ourselves. They'll pull us into their kill box." "But sir, if we stay—" "We die slowly." He leaned forward. "I've fought blind wars before, Commander. I know when a trap smells like mercy." Silence returned. Then, from a speaker overhead, the voice returned. No static this time, no glitches, just him. "Kyle Thoron, son of Conquest, killer of Earth. Tell me, how does it feel to hear your name again?" Kyle's hands tightened on the edge of the console. The voice wasn't asking questions, it was forcing memory. And for the first time in his life, Kyle didn't want to remember. He saw the ashes of Terra in his mind's eye, the fires, the way human cities fell into themselves like rotting teeth. He'd watched it from orbit, sipping Dronari wine. He'd called it a glorious beginning. "I watched you, on the broadcast. You were smiling when our oceans turned to gas." Kyle barked toward the console. "Shut it down!" But no one moved. The tech team had frozen. All of them, locked in place. Kyle looked at their faces, eyes glassy, lips parted slightly, as if caught mid-thought. Not dead, not quite, just hijacked. The voice kept speaking. "We screamed when the cities fell. We clawed the dirt when the clouds vanished, but some of us learned." The holomap warped. New images flooded the screen. Torture chambers, breeding factories, slave pits, human prisoners in chains, generations crushed beneath the Empire's rule. "You erased our records, but not our will." Kyle turned to Varric. "Reboot the display, manually." Varric snapped out of his daze, fingers trembling over the controls. "Trying, sir, processing." "No, you're not," the voice said, this time through Varric's mouth. Kyle pulled his weapon without hesitation. Blam! The shot sent Varric sprawling backward, gasping, clutching his arm. Smoke rising from a scorched pauldron. "General!" a nearby soldier shouted. Kyle ignored them. "Scan him, now." The medical drone zipped from the ceiling, hovered above Varric. Its scanners blinked rapidly, then froze. Unknown entity detected. Kyle knelt beside Varric. "Talk. Now, are you in control?" Varric's eyes were wild. Sweat beaded across his forehead. I don't know. I felt him. Inside. Not just watching. He was remembering through me." The soldiers backed away slightly. Kyle stood. He had underestimated what this was. This wasn't just tech, or stealth, or infiltration. It was personal. This man, this human, was reaching through code, through matter, through the souls of men who had never even set foot on Earth. Kyle's earpiece buzzed again. An encrypted military band, supposedly untouchable. Gorak. "Sir, it's getting worse. Half the crew's starting to hear the voice. Some are screaming. Some are just sitting, staring at the walls. Kyle exhaled through clenched teeth. How many still active? Maybe 200 out of 1,000, and dropping. Cale knew what that meant. It wasn't casualties. It was psychological collapse. One voice was bringing down a warship with memory, guilt, shame, or just the truth. Prep the Omega Core, Cale ordered coldly. There was a pause on the line. Sir, that's a last resort device, meant for system reset. I said prep it. I will not let this ship fall to a ghost with a grudge. Understood. The line cut. Kyle turned back to the crew. Seal this room. Nothing in or out. No exceptions. But sir, you let him in through the walls. You don't get to second-guess me now. The bridge locked down with a shudder. Steel barriers slid over the main doors, windows tinted to opaque black. But the light inside still flickered. Kyle stood at the center of the room, alone now, except for the drone and the injured Varric. I know you're listening, he said to the ceiling. Then listen back, came the voice again. Calm, steady, patient. You killed more than our world. You killed our place in the stars. But we adapted. Kyle narrowed his eyes. No. The human paused. No? He echoed. You didn't adapt. You hid. You crawled into ruins and cried about injustice. You waited until no one remembered your name. And now you think fear will buy you back your dignity? Cale stepped forward, eyes like burning coal. You aren't a weapon. You're a reminder, and reminders are made to be erased. The walls didn't respond, but the ship did. The floor shifted again, so subtly most wouldn't have noticed, but Cale did. The gravity field tilted, not for damage, for positioning, as if the ship was preparing to kneel. He stormed to the override terminal. Emergency codes flew across the screen. Warning, intrusion at system core location, override denied, primary control transferred. The final message blinked red. Welcome back, Commander Hawk. Kyle's breath stopped. That name, Hawk, he remembered it. The day they burned Earth, there was one human pilot who escaped the orbital net. One ship that disappeared into the atmosphere before the planet split. A rookie. A nobody. They never found him. But apparently, he found them. Kyle slammed his fist into the terminal. If Hawk wanted to play commander, he'd play God. He tapped into his wrist console. Omega Core. Initiate detonation sequence. Enter authorization code. Kyle didn't hesitate. Code. Bloodfire-7-X-19 confirmed. Detonation in 90 seconds. If he couldn't have the Valgorith, no one would. Certainly not a damn ghost. Down in the engine chamber, the core began to glow. Deep red, like a star preparing to scream. Across the ship, systems shut down. Lights dimmed. Even the enemy ships paused their movement. The human knew what this meant. Cale returned to the center of the bridge. This ends with me, he said quietly. You brought your memory. I brought fire. But the voice still didn't flinch. You think I didn't know this would be your answer? That's why I made sure it wouldn't matter. Kyle's console blinked. Omega Core shutdown request received. Accepted. Kyle's heart stopped. Error. Authorization overridden by Commander Hawk Core deactivated. He staggered backward, like something punched through his chest. No, no, no. Your weapon belongs to us now. Just like your history. Just like your sins. Kyle dropped to one knee. The lights came back on, not red, not flickering, white, clean, silent. And from the center of the bridge the air shimmered again, and the human stepped through. No tricks. No projection. This time he was real. Cale stood slowly, face to face with the last ghost of Earth. And he knew. He wasn't looking at a man anymore. He was looking at the future. Kale's hand hovered near his sidearm, not to shoot. That instinct had died 2 parts ago. This wasn't about winning anymore. That option had evaporated the moment the Omega Core shut down under someone else's command code. This was about control, about the illusion of it, and Kale had none left. Commander Hawk stood at the center of the bridge, silent, calm, like he was standing in a room that always belonged to him. His boots didn't clank against the floor. His breath didn't fog the cold air. He wasn't just aboard the Valgorith. He was inside it. "I remember you," Kale said at last, breaking the quiet like a blade dragged across bone. "Rookie pilot, barely out of training when Earth fell." Hawk said nothing. "You were there, when we turned the sky to fire. I watched your ship run from orbit." Hawk's eyes met his. "No," he said. "You watched me survive. You just didn't understand what that meant." Kyle took a slow step forward, hands open but jaw tight. "You're not a god. You're a man clinging to ruins. Then why are you sweating?" Kyle clenched his jaw. He was sweating, had been for the last 10 minutes, and the worst part? He hadn't noticed. "I didn't come to kill your crew," Hawk continued. "I came to kill your legacy." Kale barked a bitter laugh. "You think this ship is my legacy? This is just steel and circuits. You've done nothing but hijack a tomb." Hawk tilted his head. "No, Kale, this isn't a tomb." The ship vibrated slightly. The screens lit up. All across the Valgorith, systems began restoring. But they weren't Imperial. The interfaces had changed. New symbols, foreign codes, yet painfully familiar to anyone with a long enough memory. Earth Standard, human language, Old Earth OS. Kyle watched in horror as the Valgorith transformed under his feet. "You turned my ship into yours," he whispered. "No," Hawk corrected. "I returned it to something alive." One of the command crew tried to draw a weapon. He didn't even get it to his waist. The lights above him blinked, and his bones snapped like twigs under unseen pressure. He collapsed, gasping, unmoving. Kyle didn't look away. He'd ordered worse. But even he felt something new now. Vulnerability. He looked back at Hawk. "You think people will follow you just because you can hijack systems?" "They don't have to follow me," Hawk replied. "They just have to see the truth." The ship's view screens shifted again, this time to 100 different camera feeds across the galaxy, each one showing something terrifying. Other Imperial ships going dark, battleships, cruisers, border sentries, all blacking out one by one. Hawk wasn't alone. "You built your empire on memory loss," Hawk said. "You rewrote the history books. You called us extinct." Kyle turned, slowly. He was no longer looking at a bridge full of soldiers. He was standing inside a message. Every wall, every terminal, every screen now played something different. Earth, before the fire. Families, crowded streets, laughter, children playing in puddles, scientists launching crude rockets into orbit, soldiers dying under alien skies, protesters shouting at the Dronari invaders, pilots screaming over radio channels, the fall, the burn, the screams, and then the silence. Kyle watched his own face appear on one screen, the transmission of him laughing as Earth cracked from orbit. It had been broadcast live back then, propaganda for the Empire, a glorious victory. Now it looked like a war crime. Hawk stood behind him. "You won the war by turning us into villains in your story." Kyle didn't answer, because what could he say? They had turned humans into devils, primitive savages, aggressive, erratic, emotionally unstable. And yet now one human had cracked their fleet open like a skull. "I didn't make you into a legend," Kyle muttered. "You did this yourself." "No," Hawk replied, voice steady. "You made me. The day you killed my planet, I stopped being a pilot. I became the last page in your history." Kyle turned around, this time facing him fully. He stepped close, inches away. "If you're here to execute me, do it. I've slit the throats of better men." Hawk didn't flinch. "I'm not here to kill you." Kyle blinked. "What?" Hawk leaned in slightly. "I'm here to make you watch." The deck shuddered as the Valgarith began to move, engines engaging without a single crew member touching controls. The ship was flying itself. Or rather, Hawk was flying it. "Where are you taking us?" Kyle hissed. "To the core," Hawk said, "where your people build their lies." Kale's stomach dropped. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would. You attack the capital, you'll ignite a war." "You think this isn't a war?" Kyle's silence answered for him. And then Hawk said something Kale didn't expect. "You want to know what happened to us after Earth fell?" Kyle didn't respond, but Hawk answered anyway. "We didn't die. We broke, and in breaking, we evolved." He stepped past Kyle now, walking slowly around the command chamber. "You know what a human does when he's trapped? When he's hunted? When he's bleeding, forgotten, erased from history?" He paused, eyes scanning the stars through the viewport. "He becomes something else." The ship reached slipstream threshold. Lights flickered again, but not from failure, from power. Kyle could feel it. Raw energy building up, more than the Valgarith had ever used. He glanced at the readings. Numbers he didn't recognize. Symbols that didn't belong to the Empire. "You've modified the core," Kyle whispered. "I rebuilt it," Hawk said. Kyle turned toward him, voice sharp. "How?" "Pain," Hawk replied. "And time. Do you know what it's like to live 100 years inside the broken husk of a dead world?" Kyle didn't answer. Hawk looked at him again. "We built ships from wreckage, AI from memory fragments, weapons from old bones and dying stars. We became the thing you feared we'd become." He raised a hand. Outside, the black ships began forming up beside them. Silent, sleek, terrifying. Human designs, but twisted. Beautiful and monstrous. They looked like they had been grown, not built. Kyle finally felt it. Not defeat, not rage, but irrelevance. The Empire hadn't just missed the survival of humanity, it had missed their evolution. "You think you're better than us now?" Kale muttered. "No," Hawk said. "I think we're worse, and that's why we win." The ship entered slipstream. Kyle barely stayed on his feet as the stars stretched and the universe warped. They were going to the core, to the heart of the Empire. And for the first time in his career, Kale knew. He wasn't the apex predator anymore. He was the recorded confession. Slipstream travel was never gentle, but this felt different. Kale clutched a steel rail, feeling the hum beneath his boots like the snarl of a beast waiting to bite. The Valgarith had never moved this fast. Its systems had never glowed this bright. Even the air tasted wrong, metallic, electric, thick with something unnatural. And Commander Hawk stood like a statue at the front of the command deck, hands behind his back, unmoving, like he'd been here before. Kyle stared at the back of that head, fists clenched. He was supposed to be a ghost, a mistake, a name on an old debrief. He was never supposed to make it this far. Yet here he was. And they were heading straight into the core, the capital system of the Galactic Empire, home to billions, and a place where Kale's name still echoed in praise. "How did you hijack slipstream control?" Kale growled at last. Hawk didn't turn. "I didn't hijack it," he said. "I rewrote it." Kale's eyes narrowed. "This ship runs on Imperial tech. Our drive systems, our coordinates, everything is locked to our lattice." "I know," Hawk said. "You locked it. I just found the key you buried." Kale stepped forward, keeping his voice low. "You're not going to survive this, Hawk. Even if you get past the capital's defenses, they'll tear you apart. You and your fleet. Finally, Hawk turned. You still think this is about survival? Kyle didn't answer. You made it about that, Hawk went on, stepping closer now. You thought killing Earth would erase us. That if you leveled the bones deep enough, the memory would die with the dust. Kyle's jaw twitched. I did what needed to be done. Did you? You weren't a civilization, you were a threat. Because we fought back? Hawk hissed, voice tight now. Because we didn't kneel when your fleets came to orbit and demanded surrender? You were violent. You were invaders. Kyle took another step. We had to secure the galaxy. We brought order. You brought silence and called it peace. For a moment, neither man moved. Then the stars collapsed into streaks and color, and with a violent pull, slipstream ended. The Valgorith snapped back into real space, and before them hovered the core. Towers the size of mountains, rings of fire and steel, dozens of orbital battle stations circling the heart world like angry sentinels. Ships everywhere, civilian, military, merchant, diplomatic. A system so dense with life, it practically breathed. But as the Valgorith approached, something strange happened. The battle stations didn't fire, the patrol ships didn't challenge them. No alarms, no distress calls, no threat protocols. Only silence. Kyle frowned, then realized what was happening. Communications, he muttered. You're jamming them. No, Hawk replied. You are. The moment you entered Slipstream, I transferred the ship's transponder code to your personal authority. Right now, every satellite and warship in this system thinks you're in control. Kyle stared at him. You're using my name to walk into the capital? Hawk nodded. Your reputation, your rank, your clearance codes. Kyle turned to the command console. He couldn't help it. He had to check, and there it was. Transponder ID. Genkale Thuran. Priority Alpha. Access unrestricted. He was carrying his own noose. You'll never make it past planetary defense, Kyle said, voice low. Hawk didn't flinch. I don't need to. And then Kyle saw what he meant. On the view screen, behind the Valgorith, the fleet appeared. 13 black ships. Silent. Terrifying. But not alone anymore. Now there were dozens. Hundreds. They hadn't come through Slipstream. They had emerged out of the black between galaxies, hidden just outside known space. Some were big. Some were too big to comprehend. More like floating ruins turned into dreadnoughts. One looked like a collapsed star wrapped in metal. Another pulsed like a heart made of fire. All of them human. Not imperial. Not artificial. Just human rage made real. Kyle's blood ran cold. You built a fleet in exile, he whispered, and you waited until we forgot. We didn't forget, Hawk said. We learned. Inside the Capital Command Center, far below on the planet's surface, alarms were finally sounding. Too late. The Valgorith was already descending, and no one was stopping it. Not when it carried Kyle's clearance. The bridge crew, the few who hadn't been shut down, stood paralyzed. Not by force, by fear. Every screen showed the impossible, the Empire's most powerful warship, heading toward its own capital world, not to protect it, to expose it. Why not just destroy us? Kyle asked, quietly now. You could have turned this ship into a bomb, hit the capital, made a statement. Hawk looked at him, cold. That would have made you martyrs. You'd have claimed sacrifice, claimed we were terrorists. And this, Kyle asked. This, Hawk said, is humiliation. Kyle stared at the screen. The black ships weren't attacking. They were broadcasting, all over the Empire, every planet, every station, every channel. And Kyle recognized what they were sending. The old history. Earth, burning. His own face, laughing, the screams, the orbital cameras capturing the last minutes of humanity's homeworld, the twisted experiments, the slave camps, the children begging for mercy, unedited, unforgiven, and under it all, Kyle's voice narrating the destruction, his words, his glory, his lies, broadcast to trillions. In that moment, Kyle understood. Hawk wasn't taking over the Empire. He was dismantling it, from the inside out, by showing the truth. And then the Valgorith landed, not on a military base, not in orbit, but right in the middle of the Grand Plaza, where the Emperor once held coronations. The engines melted stone and glass. Civilians screamed. Elite guards rushed forward, but stopped when the ship's ID code hit their visors. Kyle Thuron, their god of war, returned, until the doors opened. And Hawk stepped out, alone, no guards, no armor, just a man, walking into the lion's den. Kyle stood at the bridge, staring after him, his throat dry, his legacy shattered, everything he had built falling apart in front of him. Hawk turned once, just before stepping onto the ramp. "You won't die today, Kyle," he said. "You'll live long enough to watch statues fall." Then he disappeared into the light. Kyle slumped into the command chair, the seat that once belonged to him. But now, it felt like a coffin, and the screams outside were just beginning. The landing ramp hissed open with a deep exhale, steam pouring into the platinum-tiled courtyard of the Grand Plaza. This place wasn't built for war. It was built for pride. Polished columns that reached for heaven. Glass statues of emperors too perfect to have existed. Hundreds of flags whipping in the wind, each representing a world the Empire had brought peace to. Soldiers lined the walkways, dressed in ceremonial armor, unsure whether to raise their rifles or salute. They recognized the ship. They recognized the man walking down the ramp even more. Kyle Thuron, war hero, general of the Corps, savior of the Drenari bloodlines. That's what their textbooks called him. What they didn't know was that the man walking out now wasn't Kyle. It was Commander Hawk. And he walked like he had nothing to fear. The soldiers didn't stop him. Maybe it was confusion. Maybe it was instinct. Or maybe it was the way his boots clanked. Slow, heavy, like each step struck the marble spine of the Empire itself. He walked through the plaza alone. No escort, no demands, no speech, just a long black coat, wind slicing around his shoulders, and eyes that hadn't forgotten anything. Inside the central spire, alarms still echoed in deep cycles, meant for civilian evacuation, not invasion. The council was in session. Emergency codes had been sent. Fleets were moving, and yet none of it mattered, because everyone was watching the same thing. Every screen, every broadcast channel, every interstellar feed, overridden, the face of Earth, and Kyle Thuron's voice narrating its death. The people were no longer listening to their leaders. They were watching the lie collapse. Hawk stepped through the outer gates of the spire. The guards flinched but didn't move. Their fingers hovered near triggers but didn't squeeze. He passed them like they weren't even real. Inside, the atrium loomed high above, a cathedral of conquest, murals depicting the burning of alien civilizations as sacred victories. The ceiling had Kyle's likeness carved into its center, arms raised as Earth cracked in two behind him, and now Hawk stood beneath that sculpture, staring up at it like it owed him something. Behind him, boots pounded against the marble floor. The High Chancellor's security forces. They surrounded him in a perfect arc, shields drawn, weapons leveled. "Identify yourself," barked one of them, voice clipped and sharp. Hawk didn't. He just raised one hand and activated the device on his wrist. A ripple of data pulsed outward, silencing their comms. Every visor went black, then lit up. with his face. And Kyle's voice, once again, speaking proudly over Earth's last breath. That was all it took. 2 of the guards dropped their weapons. 1 fell to his knees. The rest hesitated. "You came here for a reason," said a voice from above. A strong, calm one. The High Chancellor stepped into view, descending from the private lift. She was tall, Dronari-born, eyes hard as obsidian but dressed in the finest silks, political royalty. For decades she had held the line of public opinion. She had defended Kyle's legacy. She had buried human history beneath layers of manufactured pride. Now she looked down at the man who had walked straight through her gates with no fleet, no army, and no permission. "I know who you are," she said, Hawk's head tilted slightly. "You should," he replied. "You helped write the version of history that erased me." "Because history needs structure," she snapped. "Not chaos. Not memory soaked in blood." He stepped closer. "You think this is about memory? I'm not here to dig up old bones. I'm here to make sure the galaxy never forgets again." She stared at him, unblinking. "You want a trial, justice, apology. You'll get none of it." "I didn't come for justice," Hawk said coldly. "I came for exposure." A low hum filled the chamber. Screens unfolded from Hawk's back, drones hovering silently above. They activated in perfect sequence, projecting images onto every wall. The Empire's crimes, Earth's execution, Kyle's voice, the screams, the lies, the Chancellor's own speeches, spliced next to war footage she claimed never existed. She lunged forward. "Shut it down!" "No," Hawk said simply. A pulse shot out from the drones. Across the entire planet, broadcasts overrode once again. Even the Valgorith's signal was hijacked, now playing images of the Empire's deepest atrocities. Genetic experiments, torture chambers, mass civilian sterilizations. Everything they buried under galactic stability. The guards didn't move. The Chancellor screamed. "I'll have you executed!" Hawk turned to her. "You already did, 3,000 years ago." And with that, he turned his back and walked to the center of the spire. Took a seat on the ancient throne, once meant for emperors. The guards watched, unsure. No one ordered them to shoot, and no one dared anyway. Back aboard the Valgorith, Kyle Thuron stared at the transmission flooding the bridge. His face was everywhere. His crimes, once praised in golden records, now etched in fire across the stars. The screen showed the Chancellor breaking down, her voice rising into incoherent rage. Soldiers walking off patrol lines, civilians flooding the plazas, staring at the sky, their eyes wide with revelation. This wasn't rebellion. This was recognition, and Cale felt something clawing at his gut. Not fear, not guilt, displacement. He was no longer the architect of history. He was its villain. Gorak approached from the side, his usual proud gait now slowed, waited. "Sir," he said quietly. "Orders?" Kyle didn't answer. Because what was there left to command? The fleet had stopped responding. The override codes were disabled. And deep down, Cale knew the truth. If he ordered a strike now, on the capital, on Hawk, on the truth itself, it would be his soldiers who turned on him. "This was always going to happen," Cale muttered. Gorak blinked. "Sir?" "We won a war we didn't understand. Then we buried the enemy without checking if it could rot." He stood up slowly, walked to the viewport, and watched his statues fall. Back in the spire. Hawk stood once more. The transmission ended. The drones returned to silent orbit. The screens faded. The truth had been shown. And the silence that followed was not relief. It was reckoning. The Chancellor, breath heavy, face cracked with disbelief, pointed a shaking finger. You've destroyed everything, order, trust." balance. Hawk looked her dead in the eyes. No. I reminded them who paid the price for it. He turned and walked past the guards again. Not a single weapon raised. Outside, the people were pouring into the streets, not rioting, just watching. Hawk walked among them. A ghost no more. Not a soldier, not a terrorist, not even a leader. Just the one man who refused to forget, and made the galaxy remember with him. Back aboard the Valgorith later. Kyle sat in silence in his private chamber. No alarms, no demands, no orders. The ship was quiet now, like it was grieving. He picked up an old data core from the desk, one of the original Earth military logs, taken after the invasion. He had never deleted it. Part of him kept it as a trophy. Now it felt like a gravestone. He watched the footage again. Humans in trenches, screaming across broken cities, mothers shielding children from orbital strikes, men like Hawk flying broken ships against impossible odds, not because they thought they'd win, but because dying in resistance meant more than living in silence. He set the core down. And for the first time in decades, Kale Thuron didn't feel powerful. He felt witnessed. The streets of the core were quiet the next morning, not peaceful, not chaotic, just quiet. The kind of quiet that follows a funeral no one planned, or a revolution that didn't need weapons. The sky was still lit with warning colors, planetary shields flickering from stress. Defense satellites hung in orbit like stunned sentries. Broadcast towers looped the same footage over and over. Earth's burning, Kyle's face, the cries of people long turned to ash. No orders were coming from the spire, no clarifications from the council, no counter-narrative from the emperor, because no one believed them anymore. In one night, truth had cracked through the foundation of a 1,000-year empire. And once a foundation breaks, the weight above it doesn't stand still. It falls. Kyle stood at the window of his private quarters aboard the Valgorith. Behind him, the command deck was mostly deserted. Systems ran on minimal power. No one reported in. No one requested direction, because Kyle no longer commanded. The silence was his court now, and guilt was the only loyal soldier left. He didn't sleep. Couldn't. He had spent his entire life believing in structure, order, strength. That history was written by the powerful, that he could erase Earth, and the galaxy would thank him for it. But history had come back, and it had Hawk's voice. Kyle poured himself a drink, strong, bitter, traditional, the kind of drink warlords toasted over burning cities. It tasted like dust in his mouth. Behind him, the lift doors hissed open. He didn't turn. He knew who it was. Footsteps slow, even, measured. "I expected you sooner," Kyle said, staring out into the emptiness beyond the viewport. Hawk didn't speak right away, just walked to the center of the room and stood there, a shadow in uniform but no longer a soldier. Not by rank, not by allegiance, just a man. One who survived the fire. "I had things to finish," Hawk said. Kyle nodded. "I saw the broadcasts, every system, every world. They needed to see it." Kale took another sip. "You planned this for a long time." Hawk's eyes didn't blink. "I lived it for a long time." Kyle finally turned. His face wasn't defiant anymore. Not proud, not scared, just tired. "What now?" he asked. "You've won. The people know. The Chancellor's in hiding. The fleets are paralyzed." "I didn't come to win," Hawk said. "I came to end you. Not just the man. The myth. The machinery." "You could have killed me," Kale said. "I still could. But you won't." "No." Kale gave a bitter smile. "Because you want me to live with it," Hawk nodded. "Because now you carry the shame. Not in secret, not buried in clearance files, but out in the open, where it belongs." Kale walked slowly toward him. No trials, no executions, just humiliation. You wanted legacy, Hawk said. Now you have it. Kale stopped just a foot from him. His eyes searched Hawk's, and what he saw made his voice crack. You really didn't come for revenge. I came to restore memory. Silence followed, but it wasn't awkward. It was acknowledgement. Two men. One burned the world. One carried its ashes. Kyle stepped back and sat in the command chair, his throne no more, just cold metal beneath a hollow title. You're going to dismantle the Empire, aren't you? I don't have to, Hawk said. It's already collapsing. Without a war. Without a lie to hold it up. Kyle looked down at the floor. So, what are we now? The galaxy, I mean. Without all this? Hawk shrugged slightly. Lost, angry, confused. And you're going to lead them? No. Then who? Hawk stared at him for a long moment, then said, Someone who remembers what it's like to lose. Across the capital, protests had turned into silence, not because of fear, but reflection. No one could explain what they felt. Grief for strangers they never knew, rage at leaders they once trusted, emptiness where pride used to live. For the first time in generations, people were thinking instead of obeying. The statues of Kyle were toppled by civilians, not rebels, not militants, citizens. They carried no weapons, they carried names of the lost, the buried, the erased. Hawk's broadcast had included more than just video. It had included records, names of Earth's last children, their stories, their deaths. And now those names were written on walls, on flags, on broken monuments. The Empire wasn't falling in fire. It was falling in memory. And nothing could stop it. That night, Kyle stood on the landing bay of the Valgorith, watching the dark sky above. He half expected Hawk's ships to fire, to strike down the last symbol of imperial dominance. But they didn't. They hovered, silent, watching, like judges who had already passed sentence. And he was no longer a general, just a man, one of billions, no longer feared, just known. He thought of every planet he'd conquered, every city he'd crushed, every child who looked up and saw his name etched into the stars like a god's. Now they looked up and saw him for what he really was. Not a savior, not a leader, just a butcher. And somehow, that was worse than death. Hawk stood in the square, boots planted in the center of the old imperial seal, now cracked by protesters. He looked up at the towering spire, the one the emperors built to look down on everyone. I want it torn down, he said. His people, the ones who had lived in hiding, building fleets from wrecks, AI from fragments, history from trauma, stood behind him. You want the seat for yourself? One of them asked. Hawk looked around, at the people, the lights, the faces filled with questions, pain, and fire. No, he said. Let them rebuild it. Who? The ones who remember. He walked away, not toward power, but away from it, because no man should ever have it unchecked. Not again. The next morning, Kyle sent a message. To Hawk, not an apology, just 2 words. I remember. It was the only honest thing he had said in years. And Hawk replied. Not with words, but with silence. Because some things don't need to be said anymore. The spire came down 3 days later, not with fire, not with explosives, but by hand. The people pulled it apart, stone by stone. Its marble columns, once symbols of imperial glory, were used to rebuild the refugee districts on the outskirts of the core. The glass murals were melted into windows for homes that had never had sunlight before. The banners, the flags, the golden seal of the empire, they were burned. Not out of rage, out of recognition. It had to end somewhere, And the only way forward was through the ashes of what was once worshipped. Cale watched the live feed from the Valgorith. He hadn't spoken to anyone since Hawk's visit, not because he was imprisoned. No one had arrested him. No tribunal had marched through the doors. They didn't need to. He was already sentenced. To live. To watch the world change without him. He had sent one final message. I remember. Hawk never replied. But Cale saw his face in every broadcast, every protest, every reconstruction plan. Not as a leader, not as a god, just as the man who pulled the mask off the galaxy and showed everyone the face underneath. Hawk stood at the border of the slums once designated for non-citizen habitation, the polite term the Empire had used for ghettos, mining labor camps, and abandoned zones. Now children ran barefoot across cracked streets that hadn't seen joy in generations. Old men painted over military signage. Former soldiers handed out food instead of rifles. The Empire hadn't fallen in battle. It had collapsed under its own reflection. We should start forming councils, said a voice behind him. It was Yaren, one of the surviving AI-augmented tacticians from Hawk's hidden fleet. He had been a war thinker. Now he worked logistics, food lines, power redirection. People are waiting, Yaren added. They want a new seat, something stable. Hawk didn't turn. He just looked at the horizon, where the skeletons of Imperial cruisers were being torn apart by civilians and repurposed into housing. No more thrones, he said. Yaren frowned. Then what? There'll be chaos, infighting, opportunists. There always is, Hawk replied, but let them build, not me. You bled for this. I bled to make it visible, not to wear a crown. Yaren sighed. So what are you now, then? A symbol? No. Hawke finally turned. I'm just a witness. Elsewhere, in the remains of what used to be the Imperial History Vault, a small team of archivists, some of them survivors, others defectors, a few just curious, began restoring what had been deleted. They didn't use the Empire's categorization. They didn't sanitize names. They didn't rearrange time. They simply opened the raw data streams, full of screams, corruption, suppression, civilian resistance, and all the dirty, jagged human pain that had been scrubbed away. Kyle's name appeared on thousands of files, sometimes as a commander, sometimes as a speaker, sometimes as the executioner. And every time it appeared, they tagged it. Not with hatred, just with confirmed. Because remembering wasn't revenge, it was reality. Aboard the Valgorith, Kyle walked its halls in silence. The crew didn't salute him anymore. Some avoided him. Others looked at him like a relic in a museum. Not dangerous, just out of place. No one had the heart to strip him of rank. Because there was no rank anymore. The Empire's chain of command had rusted away overnight. Orders had stopped flowing. Planets declared independence, some peacefully, others not. Former governors were lynched in public. Others joined the rebuilding, changing uniforms for humility. Kyle had nowhere to go, so he stayed on the ship he once commanded, walking it like a ghost through the halls of a tomb. Every time he passed the command deck, the old broadcast would flicker briefly on one screen. His face, Earth, his voice, the lie. He didn't shut it off. He just kept walking. In the orbit above a former Imperial Forge world, Hawk's fleet stood still. No longer black ghosts, no longer secret weapons. Now they were sentinels. They monitored the sectors where the worst abuses had occurred, not to rule, but to remind. Ships hovered not as threats, but as memorials. Some were converted into archive vessels. Others became aid carriers. A few remained armed, not for conquest, but to prevent another coil. Are we done? One of the newer commanders asked Hawk during a strategic session. No, Hawk said, but the story's no longer being told by them. So what now? Hawk looked at the map, not of territories, not of borders, but of names. Restored names, human names, whole planets dedicated to every Earth city lost, colonies bearing the names of those who died nameless under the Empire's reign. We rebuild, Hawk said. Then we step back. A year passed. Kyle never left the Valgorith. Hawk visited once more, not as a gesture of power, but something closer to closure. Kale met him at the hangar. He looked thinner, older, the hard lines of his jaw now softened by solitude. You've kept me alive longer than I deserve, Kale said quietly. Hawk shrugged. You were sentenced to memory, not mercy. They stood in silence. Then Kyle gestured to a data pad. I recorded it, he said. Everything I did, everything they buried, even what I couldn't admit before. Hawk didn't reach for it. Why? Kyle looked him in the eye. Because now, I need to remember. Another long silence, and then Hawk asked, Do you regret it? Kyle didn't answer for a long time. When he did, his voice cracked. I regret that it took someone like you to stop me. Hawk nodded, then walked away. The galaxy did not become utopia. Some worlds fought over scraps of power. Others tried to crown new emperors. A few fell into chaos, unsure of who to follow now that the lie was gone. But most remembered. That was enough. Schools taught the truth, the real truth, not sanitized, not rewritten. Earth was no longer just the first conquest. It was a scar, a name that meant something again. Children drew maps of the old planet. Veterans named settlements after its mountains. Drenari parents whispered the stories of Hawk not as myth, but as proof that erasure doesn't work forever. The galaxy didn't need a new empire. It just needed to feel human again. And Hawk? He disappeared quietly. Some said he lived among the rebuilt zones. Others said he took a single ship and flew toward the edge of known space, where no memory could follow. The truth? No one knew, because he didn't need to be remembered anymore. The galaxy already remembered itself. As for Kale, he died 10 years later. Quietly. No monuments, no procession. But the datapad he left behind? That became part of the restored archives, not as justification, not as apology, but as confession. A man who once conquered stars, now reduced to the last truth he could offer. Not his power, just his account. And beside that file, in every system that kept history now, was another name. Hawk Elias, Commander, Last of Earth. But beneath it, a single entry line. He made us remember.